Hey everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for coming to this. So just to start off, I'll ask a question. How many of you out there are already working in a department that is actively servicing imaging equipment in any way, shape, or form? Okay, so quite a bit of you. That's good. At my hospital, we went in-house back in 2016, and we started to bring in imaging service to our program. So we kind of started at the base level with no real knowledge. I didn't have any knowledge of imaging equipment before I was contracted biomed, and we didn't touch imaging. Don't call us about it. It's not on the contract. Sorry. So we had to start from scratch. And what I'll be talking about today is just kind of how to get your program going, or if you're already there, how to be successful. Also, I want to leave some time at the end for us to have a discussion, maybe some questions or suggestions for me and everybody else in the room that's already managing imaging equipment to help us all get better. I don't think I have this all figured out. I'm simply trying to kind of share the mistakes and the successes that we've found along the way. So to start out, I'll talk a little bit about my hospital. We're a 414 bed facility. It's about an hour north of Dallas, Texoma Medical Center. I'll also shamelessly use this as an opportunity to plug the openings that I have. We're looking for people. I feel like we're struggling right now as an industry. We all know this, right? So, and I'll talk about that later. But we do have some open positions. But we have, in addition to the main hospital, we've got 2 offsite imaging centers, 2 freestanding ERs. We have a critical access facility in Bonham. It's about 25 beds. Many offsite, satellite clinics that we manage. And our HTM department consists of 6 FTEs. We are in-house. As far as the imaging equipment goes, we have 8 CTs. We were doing full service CT about a year ago, but I had my CT engineer retired. He had been doing it for a long time, so he's gone. We don't do CT right now. We have 4 MRIs. We're doing first look and PMs on a couple of our MRIs right now. We do what we can on those. We don't get crazy and try to replace the cold head and stuff like that, but we do a lot. 5 RNF rooms. I have a basic X-ray person right now who's been to training, so we do what we can with X-ray as well. 3 cath labs. I had a cath lab engineer, but he isn't on the team anymore, so we're not doing those. 5 mammo systems. Again, I keep saying used to. I've tried mammo in the past, had a guy train. Right now, I'm not looking at doing that in-house. We've got them on contracts. 12 C-arms, 11 portable X-ray. We are doing basic X-ray. I've got a guy lined up for C-arm training later this month. So we're gonna start those 2 again. 46 ultrasounds. We are still doing all the ultrasounds. That doesn't include sonocytes. And 4 nuke med cameras. Haven't touched nuke med yet. So if anybody out there, has any experience with them, maybe we could talk afterwards. So the benefits, what are the benefits of doing imaging service either in-house or whether you're a contracted biomed group or whoever you are? What's the value of having an on-site presence at the hospital that can respond to imaging service problems? Well, if you're handling the service yourself, obviously you're going to minimize service costs. If you have somebody there that can respond immediately, you're also going to decrease downtime for your systems. One of the benefits is just getting to know the radiology department and them showing appreciation for you and what you do. They're always going to prefer having somebody there every day that's the same guy that they like doing business with, as opposed to just random field engineers that come in from the companies. They don't communicate well. Some of the imaging engineers are better than others at that. And by supporting the imaging equipment, if you do it successfully for a long period of time, you will solidify the success of your department and the appreciation for it. Whenever administration has to look at, maybe there's some budget cuts going on, some down staff cuts, maybe downsizing, it will be harder for them to take you away if you're keeping the imaging system up and running. A lot of the imaging techs that operate the equipment are not used to having us around that can respond quickly. Some of them have been at imaging clinics before or hospitals where if they had a little issue with their system that they either had to figure out a workaround that's not really ideal, or they would have to wait for a day or two before that guy shows up. So they get really used to us, and they know how it is the other way, so they prefer to have it where there's somebody there that can help them. And the last thing on here, working with advanced technology. So I don't know about you guys, but one of the reasons I got into this field is because I was intrigued by the technology and getting to learn every day about new things. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no cooler tech out there in the hospital than some of the imaging equipment. I mean, you're looking at the cutting edge of what's out there. So it's a way to feed those technicians that you may have that are intelligent and are capable of working on high-end equipment. It's just giving them a challenge, and a lot of technicians feed off of that, right? They always want to learn, they want to challenge themselves. I mean, that's about as hard as it gets. Some of this imaging equipment, you can find a lot of, you can motivate your staff by just getting to work on that stuff. So for years, you know, in the hospital, I would hear that the OR is the lifeblood of the place. Like, it's the financial support, and without that, you know, forget about it. Now that might be true, but when I looked at other departments in my hospital, I noticed that it's not just the OR that's generating a lot of revenue. In fact, some of the areas may be generating more than the OR, and the radiology department is one of them. So we hear all the time, you know, systems, if an imaging system's down, we're losing a lot of money. Of course, it makes sense to, even if we have to pay for, you know, $10,000 to have whoever it is come out here and look at it, we don't want to be down 2 days, so let's go ahead and do that. But that was always the statements that I would hear, but I never really knew, okay, well, exactly how much are we talking about? How much revenue do these systems generate? Now, so what I wanted to have like a benchmark, a general number. So where the best thing I could come up with, and I did a lot of digging on this. This is probably what took me the longest for the research that I had to do for this presentation, was trying to get a grasp on how much a CT can generate, how much an ultrasound, whatever it is. And if you, every year, the CMS reimbursement rates change based on what's happening, and the information is public. So they put out CPT codes, and if you don't have a background in medical billing and understanding those algorithms, you know, good luck trying to make sense of it. I had to enlist the help of my accounting department, and they showed me these figures. Now, what I'll say is, if you're working at a for-profit hospital, you're charging way more than the CMS reimbursement rate for a CT. I read one article, it was on as the NPR website, about a guy who he got billed like $10,000 for his CT. So that's a more extreme case, but the for-profits are charging way more than that. So given that information, if we have people on site that can immediately respond when there's problems, you know, can we avoid lost revenue by reducing downtime? And, you know, I think that answer is clearly yes. To take an example here from my actual hospital, we have a CT in our ER that's pretty busy. It had 17,000 scans last year. So if you divide that by how many days in the year, you get 48 scans a day. By the hour, you're looking at 2 scans per hour. Now, we all know that there are peak times when you're scanning more than twice an hour. I just wanted to come up with an average. There's also some days where you're scanning way more than others, but in general, that's what you're looking at. And I found this pretty neat tool online that shows you the going rate for a procedure in your area. It's not just for imaging, you can put anything in there. But what I will say about that tool is, and then I'll put the website down there, it's healthcarebluebook.com, but you can type in the procedure and it tells you, you know, I think it showed me like 10 facilities in my around my zip code within a certain mile radius and what they charged. It didn't have all the facilities because not all the facilities are going to share and make that information public. So I feel like you look at a CT with contrast of the head, that's probably that's probably on the mid to low end of what they're billing. But if we use that example, in 1 hour, that CT could theoretically generate about $1,000. So, you know, you do the math on that and in a day, figure out what you're looking at. So if we're there, whether or not we may not know how to change the tube. We may not even have somebody trained on CT. But if you have a guy trained on X-ray and the CT's down and you know who the CT field engineer is, you may have it on a contract. Just simply you being there and able to talk to the engineer and maybe run some diagnostics or try a few simple tasks with his help. I'm sure many of you out there have done that. You're gonna be able to enable that technician to order the part without him even being there. He's gonna know what he needs to do before he shows up. You could be shaving a day off the downtime with that alone. So that right there provides value. Another thing I put on here is, and this is something that I do at my hospital with the MRIs. I will reach out to the technicians to kind of get a feel for, they have to go to lunch, right? And there's usually a break around noon where they might have an hour or sometimes even 2 hours where they're not scanning. So I try to break the PMs up into maybe 2 or 3 days, 4 days, however long I need. And I just check back and I try to get them when they're already not scanning. Instead of, if you have it on a contract and you have to schedule, you know, 2 or 3 weeks in advance, you're taking them down and they have to block their schedule off. So you're losing revenue right there. And these are things that aren't always just in your face, obvious, tangibly to see like, oh, we're losing revenue. You have to kind of pull that out and show your administrator or whoever you're trying to convince or justify what you're doing. Think about that. So how much can we save by having an on-site imaging service team? You can save quite a bit depending on how much you're trying to do. This is just one little snapshot of a spreadsheet that I maintain. I do this for all the stuff that we choose to take off contract. And if you are managing imaging service, I'm sure you have your own kind of tool or way to look this up. You may even have a tool in your CMMS that crunches all this data for you and just spits it out. Unfortunately, I don't have that. I still have to do it the old-fashioned way. So I made a spreadsheet that takes the day that I removed it from a contract or the day that it came off of its warranty, and I also have the contract cost listed. So it's every day when I open it up, it calculates by the day how much we've saved. The only thing I have to input is then how much have we spent on the service? How much did we spend in paying a vendor to come out or on parts? I even include our labor, our in-house labor costs in the calculation. So then I get a savings column. And this it allows you to kind of keep track of what you're doing and make sure that you're still managing it correctly as time goes by. Do we want to keep doing this? And if you do it the right way, you will find that you're going to win most of these gambles. And if you pay attention to it, you can cut off the ones that are bleeding and you're losing money on and kind of rearrange how you're doing it. So what we're looking at here is just some C-arms in the OR and 4 of our cardiac ultrasounds. We manage way more imaging equipment than this. I just wanted to give a small little snippet, and that right there alone, we've saved $289,000. Some of these dates that we took it off contract go back to, most of them are around 2018, 2019, but in that amount of time, on just those alone, we've saved that much. So it can be considerable depending on how much you're doing. So we've talked about kind of the benefits to doing imaging service, but let's talk about now about some of the things to look out for. The first thing, regulatory requirements. So many of you already know that CMS, Joint Commission, whoever your accrediting agency is that comes to inspect your hospital, they require imaging equipment to be maintained according to OEM recommendations. So what does that mean for us? Well, we're all familiar, I'm sure, with the right to repair issue and the interests that are lobbying to basically put us on the bench so that we can't do this anymore. I don't want to be the reason why they have ammunition to argue, you guys don't know what you're doing. You should just put everything on an OEM contract. So if my guys are doing X-ray PMs or any imaging PM, I'm going to make sure we're doing it to OEM spec. And if I don't have the checklist that the OEM goes by or their PM requirements, how can I make sure I am doing it to OEM spec? Some of you might be surprised, many of you won't though, if you watch some of these imaging engineers, and I'm not going to pinpoint OEM versus third party, they may not be doing it to OEM spec. How are you going to know if you're not with them or at least demanding that checklist? And what I can tell you is a lot of times when you're surveyed, handing over a PM report like we do for a defibrillator or some other devices, when it comes to imaging, if it's an ACR surveyor or somebody who actually knows about imaging service, they want to see that checklist. They don't want to just see something that says PM completed, which is a lot of times that's all you'll get, even from the manufacturers. You'll get a little, you've all seen it, it just says PM complete. And you ask them for the checklist, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll get that to you next week. A lot of times you never get it. You really have to fight for that stuff. But make sure you have it if you're doing it yourself. At least I make sure I have it. ACR requirements, so yeah, if your facility is ACR accredited, make sure you understand what the requirements are and how it relates to what you're doing. Most of the ACR requirements are related to like QC checks that the users will have to do, but sometimes the waters can become a little clouded on what you're doing versus what they're doing, and some of the technicians will fall back on that excuse. Like if they're caught and they're not doing their QC checks, they might say, "Oh, we thought Biomed was doing that. We thought those guys did it," because they have an ultrasound phantom and they use the same one that the physicist does. Aren't they doing it? So if they're under the impression that you are doing it, you need to figure out, is this something that we're going to do or not? And if you are, just make sure you're doing it right. At my facility, we do the physicist checks on ultrasound, and he signs off on that. So we save a little bit by doing that because we were already testing all the transducers anyway. So we turn in our document to our physicist. He signs off. That way he doesn't have to go track them all down and bill us for that EPE. When you're servicing imaging equipment and if the physicist finds something wrong with that imaging device, they will list it on their EPE or their inspection form. And usually that gets turned into radiology. And what I've noticed is sometimes the physicists don't make it really clear that they found something. They just put it on the report. And if your radiology director doesn't read that closely, he may not even see that the guy found something. And you only have a certain amount of time to fix that issue. I believe it's 30 days. Correct me if anybody in here knows that I'm wrong, but if you don't find out until like the third week past, oh yeah, I found this thing, you guys got to fix this, you're already 3 weeks behind getting that addressed. So it's a good idea. You may not want to do this at your place, but we actually document the physicist reports in our database. So we treat them just kind of like we open a work order and we attach the physicist document against that device. That way, if for some reason we get surveyed in the radiology department, maybe they got a new director, they're not keeping up with their documentation, at least we have a backup copy if we need it. It also helps you to kind of understand what's going on with your equipment, because like I said, the physicist will often find things that are wrong. One time we were getting an ACR inspection at our mammo clinic, and this is at a point where we were doing mammo service. So the physicist found a problem with the tube output. The power output wasn't up to spec. So my guy replaced the tube, did all the cals, everything was fine. But months later, when we got surveyed, they said, hey, this physicist found a problem and there's no clear correlation to what y'all did to fix it. And I'm like, okay, I looked it up and I'm like, okay, here's our service report. We changed the tube. And the surveyor was like, I can see by what he did that he probably addressed the problem that was found, but in the future, you guys need to clearly state that you are fixing the problem that the physicist found on your service report. That way there's a clear path to resolution. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense, so going forward, that's what we do. So the FDA, CFR Title 21 talks about certain components of an X-ray system that when you replace them, you need to inform the FDA. Also, if you're installing a system, you're supposed to get a new installation record. It's the 2579 form. So in the past, you had to turn that into the FDA and locally have that on file. They changed that though this year to where the FDA no longer requires the 2579 to be turned into them, but they do want it to be kept on site. And if you have any state regulations, that they might still make you turn it into the state. But so what those components are in this CFR Title 21, know what those components are. If you're changing anything about the X-ray power output, if you're doing a tube, a high voltage generator, anything that controls that X-ray power, you're gonna need an EPE when it's done. So you need to be aware of that. And if your guys are changing tubes, then it becomes their prerogative to inform the radiology director, not only them, but you as well as if you're managing the program, so that you guys don't get caught without having that physicist come check it out when they're done. So now let's talk about state requirements. So I was going through, for those of you that are operating in Texas, I was going through the Texas Department of Health stuff. I was just looking for anything related to biomedical repairs, and I stumbled upon this, which I had not heard about before. There's really, when you think about it from a regulation standpoint, as a biomed, there are no requirements as far as, like, you won't really find a regulation out there that says to be a biomed or a biomedical technician, you must have this degree. We all have our own standards, but there's nothing that's imposed on us by the regulatory agencies. But this is the first time that I saw there is actually one, and it's related to X-ray repairs. So if you've got a guy working on X-ray, they have to have one of the following requirements. So 1 year of formal training. So if they've been to X-ray school and working on that, or an associate's degree in biomedical equipment repair. So most of us that hire people, they are gonna have this, right? I mean, that was always the standard, but we're in crazy times. Some of us have opened the door to candidates that don't have an associate's degree because we have to. Otherwise, we're just, it's dry out there. But if you do hire somebody like that, they can't do X-ray. They can't do X-ray until they're trained. So if you don't have that, So you can also have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering with specialized training in radiation producing devices, or a combination of training and experience totaling 1 year to include these 3 right here. So just if you're working in Texas on X-ray, make sure you're meeting these requirements. I've never had a surveyor ask me about this, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to follow it, right? Like we need to make sure we're doing it up to what they say. So the other thing too, so we talked about the regulatory side. The other thing you need to know about is the financial risk. So you can save a lot of money by servicing imaging equipment, but you can also lose a lot of money if you don't really have any method or strategy to what you're doing. So find the best fit for your situation. I underline your situation because there are a number of variables that come into play there. How good of a relationship do I have with my CFO? What has our strategy been in the past with taking financial risks? Do we want to go full service, shared support, parts only, at risk? Full service is obviously, you're not doing it. You might still be calling the vendor, but you're not servicing it yourself. With the shared support, a lot of vendors, the OEMs will offer a shared support program. You can usually save like 15 to 30% around there. Some of them offer one that, you're covered on parts. All you have to do is first look and the PMs, and if you need help, they don't bill you for that. You just have to try. So the good thing about that is you're limiting your risk financially, but you're also not going to save as much as you can if you go for some other stuff. But on some equipment, that's the best approach. If you've got an MRI or a CT that's new to the market or has high dollar parts that might fail regularly, you don't want to be at risk on those. And then there's obviously the parts only agreements where any labor that you need from the vendor would be billable, and then just completely at risk. There's a lot of stuff I have at risk. So if you understand what you're getting involved with, that might be the best approach for what you're doing. So when you're trying to figure out what coverage level do I want, there's things to consider. We'll start off with, how old is this system itself? If I've got a 10-year-old R&F room, I may not want to just completely go at risk on that. The parts that are very expensive on that system might start to fail. So now's not really the time to pull that off. How long has this model been on the market? We all want the latest and greatest stuff, but when it comes to the imaging equipment, what I've found, if your system's only been out for, or if it just came out, you can't really expect to find vendors out there, third-party vendors, that will be able to touch it or do some of the work to it for 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, and there won't be that many parts out there on the market. So you want to kind of hit that sweet spot where it's already been out for a little bit, not too long, but to where third-party vendors and the used part market is already starting to gain some traction. How popular is that system? If you've got some weird C-arm that you've never seen or heard of, that may not be the one that you want to try your hand at. You want to pick the stuff that's out there. Everybody's got them. There are a lot of choices out there to pick from when it comes to the vendors that service them, and the parts are all over the place. How reliable has it been? Obviously, if the system's been down 10 times since the warranty started, you don't really want to take a chance on one of those systems. And how many do we have? If I've got 10 of the same X-ray room versus, if I've got 2 over here that are this model and 2 that are that model, I might want to look at another modality instead of basic those X-ray rooms. I might want to look somewhere where I've got all of the same model. That way, when I send my guy to training, he can be more effective, and he's not just pigeonholed to those two systems. And then finally, what are the most expensive parts on this thing? And you can gain this knowledge from many different ways, but it's important that you do the research and understand what they are. you've got to know what's the worst case scenario. You know, if we get a thunderstorm that takes out our detector, how much is that going to cost? Those are the things you want to make sure you understand. So for those of you who aren't doing imaging yet and you're thinking about it, where to start? So when we started, the first thing that we did was just simply approach our radiology department and let them know that we're here now and that we're going to start to be the people involved when there's problems, and we will call the vendor and manage that service event. We'll schedule it with the vendor, we'll track what they're doing and document what they're doing. And this is going to give your team a basic understanding of, okay, what are these devices? Why do they fail? What are the common fixes that these vendors are doing, and what are the parts that they're commonly putting in? And as you're documenting the service, you know, start to gain trust with your radiology department and support, because if you don't have their trust and support, good luck trying to take on the imaging side. With imaging engineers, a lot of times they don't really like it when the biomed, and as far as I've seen, some of them don't like having to go through us because they've never had that level of scrutiny on them about asking them what they're doing. They've always just been able to tell the radiology director, you know, I got a part on order, it needs a part, whatever. They're not asking them all, like, what part is it? You know, didn't that just fail 3 months ago? Some radiology directors might be asking that, but not all of them. So if you don't have the trust and support of your radiology management and the radiology team, they're going to keep calling the engineer straight. They're going to text the OEM guy, hey, I got a problem, can you come out? You may not even know that the system was down. You may not know that it was repaired. You're going to miss out on that information. So you got to build trust. Then, like we were talking about earlier, just before you take something on, understand what's the financial risk, and you got to do your homework. If that doesn't sound appealing, you may want to think twice before you do this, because it's a very important piece to this. And so not only do your research and understand what the risks are, but explain that risk to your administrator. You may have a system that you may have an X-ray room that's got a detector that costs $100,000 to replace if it should fail, a wireless detector. I have a few rooms like this. The OEM, you know, they want like 50 to 60K a year. I think it may even be more than that to cover our room plus our detector for drops and everything else. So I went to my administrator and I'm like, we can pay 70 grand a year, or we can go at risk and know that if they drop that detector once every however often, we're going to have to pay 100 grand to get it fixed. And that might be a risk that they're willing to take. So just make sure that they understand that risk before you get into it. Because that way, at least when you come to them with a $100,000 invoice for the detector, they understand, okay, this is the risk we took. Maybe we need to look at this again. Are they dropping this detector often? Maybe we need to get out of this. So you want to, if you're just starting out, also you want to start with basic modalities. Ultrasound is a good one to start with. Highly skilled technicians can pick up ultrasound pretty quick. And there's also a lot of good vendors out there that help with ultrasound, and you can call them and they can, you know, interpret your logs and kind of let you know what part you need to go after. If you're just starting out, they can really help you. The X-ray, of course, the X-ray rooms and portable X-ray. Also start with just doing first look stuff, you know, send a guy to training and start him off as what he's comfortable with, and he can let him know he can fall back on vendor support if he needs to. So if you've got your program going, now how do we keep it going? This is the hardest piece for me. It's not tracking the service costs, but you should need to do that. You need to make sure that you're effective and you're still saving what you thought you would be saving when you first started out, and update your strategy as needed. None of this is fixed and in place. It's always changing. It's changing based on how old your equipment gets and how the people are treating it, how many patients you're scanning. There's a lot of variables that come into play. So don't think you'll just be able to set things how they are and then leave it. Your staffing is probably the biggest hurdle that you're going to find in sustaining your imaging program. This is one that, for me, this is the hardest piece of the puzzle, right? Because if you've got a guy that can do CT or MRI, even X-ray, whatever it is, imaging in general, they can command higher salaries from OEMs and third parties. So you got to be selective on who you pick and have a good backup plan for if those guys choose to leave. And understand that if you feed a person imaging equipment, just know that that possibility exists that they might want to go somewhere else. And it is going to happen. So that's something you need to consider. And then with that comes, do we have a way to compensate those technicians in our group, the top tier guys that we do want to give this imaging piece to? Do we have a way to take care of them financially? Do we have a different job title for them, or are they kind of the same as everybody else, but maybe we have a way to give them a little bit more? So you got to put something like that in place, and then have a training plan. How do we keep a pipeline going for people to get trained? And my organization, we try to do this on the negotiation side. Like if we're doing a purchasing agreement with the company to say, we're going to buy your CTs for the next 5 years, but we want some training pool dollars built into that contract. We've been pretty successful with getting vendors to do that whenever you make those negotiations. That way, you kind of always have that pool to feed your team. But look into stuff like that. Find some vendors that you like to do business with and that have positive results. Not only vendors that can service your equipment, but also vendors that do training. There's a lot of good imaging training vendors out there. So have those vendors at your disposal, because your guys are sometimes they're gonna leave, or they might be on vacation when your CT goes down or your X-ray room, and you need to call that vendor to help you out. So make sure you have some in place that you trust and that do good work. And this piece here, you've got to take a seat at the table when it comes to imaging equipment purchases. This is no secret. As a biomed or working in the biomedical field, we want to be involved with those capital discussions to make sure that maybe our input won't sway their opinion one way or the other, but it might affect their opinion, right? If you've got the decision between two vendors and they're kind of split 50-50, maybe your weigh-in will matter. So, and you want to aim for continuity. If you already have 4 X-ray rooms that are by one vendor, why would you start buying this other vendor, right? And a lot of times that might happen, and we may not be able to stop it all the time, but we have an argument for continuity, and they do too. The users the X-ray techs are already up to speed on this operating system that this manufacturer has. Why do we want to change that? So kind of use that argument. And then when it comes to imaging equipment, it's also no secret that a lot of them are very guarded with what they'll let us have access to, right? When you take the big 3, there's one that's pretty forthcoming. In fact, you can go on the website and download whatever you need: service manuals, installation manuals. They'll sell you parts. You can call this is an OEM. You can call their parts guys for an MRI and just say, hey, I need the cradle latch for this system, and they will give you the part number. And sometimes they'll even send you diagrams for it. There's another vendor of the big 3 that is kind of in the middle, and they'll let you download some of the service manuals, but a lot of them you can't get access to. And then the third one won't give you anything. They put up a complete wall. The only way you can't even reload software unless you have a shared support agreement and to get their key. So if I have a decision between these 3, why would I pick the one over here that doesn't give me anything? I don't like them. I don't like having to service their equipment, and I'm going to let my radiology manager know how hard it is for us to get in there. Because if they do value what we're doing, that might have a big impact on their decision. And I'm not going to disparage any of them here. You probably know who they are, which ones I'm talking about. So take that into consideration. Well, that's all I've got. I wanted to leave some time at the end for anybody that wants to ask a question or has a suggestion. If I missed anything and you have an idea that you want to share with the team, please do. Please do.